just looked at how to use your hands to pull yourself up. We looked at sculling a little bit to keep you up and some of the energy it takes. And the big thing I want to push with this one is that we talked about if you're straight up and down, it's much harder than when you're laid back. And if you noticed, as William was doing his sculls and things, you'd see him lay back at times, and it makes it easier because he's got more of his body spread out that way than it does when it's straight up and down. The pull's a little harder. But there's another thing we can do with that same pull, exactly like we did in the water, that lets us be flat and to bring ourselves up and down and up and down. So what I'm going to do is ask William to start at the top, pull himself down, which is the easiest thing for him to do, right? And then I'm going to get him to pull himself up. And all he's doing when he's pulling himself up is reaching his hands up a little bit, trying to get his head and shoulders kind of in line with where his hands are. And then he's going to pull back at an angle. So he's going to pull back and down, and that's going to move him forward and up. So you're always going the opposite direction you pull. And what we're trying to do is get him laid out so he has as much surface area in the water as he can, so that the water's lifting him as much as he can be lifted. And it's going to lift him as much as he can. His power is going to get him to the top, and then he's just going to stop and grab a breath. Eventually we move to get me to the top, roll over, come back down, get me to the top, roll over. And when you come up, you grab your breath and you roll over. But he's going to show us stopping in this process. So if you would, sir. So what he just did was a pull across the water, and in this case he just pushed his hands down to get his face up out of the water to get a breath, and that works nice. As long as he's pulling with some force across the water, he stays up for a ways. And what happens is when he pushes himself up, the extra weight that happens from his head and his chest or whatever comes out of the water pushes him back down. But if he can be laid out in the water, it doesn't drop him as close to the bottom as it does if he comes up and he's more straight up and down. So you want to try that one more time, and let's just watch it. So thank you very much, appreciate it. So the trick then becomes, how do you come up, get that breath, and then roll yourself back over, and we'll show you that with Tony. But this is a way to get a breath that you didn't have before. Right. Do you feel the difference in how quickly you drop when you're laid out than when you don't? It's just noticeable, right? So that's the piece you're going for, is the waters may not hold you up like a floater, but it's always pushing to get you up. Remember, you're not I think I said a brick. You don't sink like a brick. You don't sink like a rock. It's always pushing you up, and your job is to take advantage of that as much as you can as a sinker, so that you're not having to work any harder than you have to work. So William and I are working on kicking. It's one of the ways you propel yourself in the water. We looked at sculling, we looked at pulling. Kicking's another way. This, like sculling, is not something that most people pick up right off the bat. Williams had
cyclists.
Especially cyclists, yeah. Runners have a particularly hard time too. And it mostly has to do with letting your ankles be loose. So if you don't get this right off the bat, don't worry about it, keep practicing with it. He's made tremendous progress over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we do about 10 or 15 minutes a week on it. That's it. Don't get frustrated with this. Don't think you have to get it right off the bat. Again, this many people get it quickly, this many people take a while, so take your time with this. You want your legs to be loose, you want them to be long and straight, but not stiff. You're not trying to make them hard. You can let them be loose, but you particularly want, and this is the thing that's so hard for cyclists and runners, you want your ankles to be loose and floppy. And I say, imagine that you take your shoe off your ankle and then you're trying to flip it across the room. You want your leg to be that floppy. So we just lay back here and practice. We're using our hips to move our whole leg. This isn't a knee down activity. This is full leg. We're going up and down, and we're looking and we're seeing if we can make the water bubble in front of us. That's what we want to do. If you come up with your feet like this, it's not going to help you. In fact, it'll turn into a break in the water. You want your ankles to be loose, preferably your toes pointed a little that direction. If your ankles are really, really tight, there's some exercises you can do. Maybe we can even put a link into some of those so you can see what they are. but there's this is all to be nice and floppy with boiling water. And you can see he gets a little bit of boil right there. That's what we're looking for. That's better. His first leak was just like this. So if that's you, don't worry about it. Just keep going. Focus really hard on keeping your ankles loose. So we talked a little about kicking. We talked a little about sculling. You've seen how it can be, sculling particularly can be useful for getting you up. We'll show you how the kicking is also useful for keeping you up in a back float. When you first get started on it, it's not the simplest thing on the planet to do. And so William's going to show us some sculling and some kicking early stages, and then Tony will show us some further down stages, and you'll see where it's going. But this is a good progression for it. So thank you, sir. Sure. Beautiful. I was like, who knew he was going to turn around? I mean, that's just too fancy, isn't it? So right there at the end, you drank some water and you got turned around. So it doesn't feel comfortable yet, but it's more than you had when you started. And again, you're seeing some progression in the process. So that's what we're looking for. And then we'll look at it further down with Tony, and that'll be smooth and cleaner. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. It's a YouTube channel. We're here, so there are a few things we need to say.
You should like and subscribe to keep up with us.
Ring the bell so you know when the next video comes out, and share with your friends.
If you've got comments, let us know. We will respond to your comments. We have merch down at the bottom. It's not anything as cool as this, but it's the newest versions of these things. And we have a lot of other social medias like
Facebook
and TikTok
and Instagram.
And we wish you years of comfort in the water.